it's a pretty... The process that we use is the same here as we do in the workshop. So we do it by hand. And the reason why we do it by hand is that we can use leather everywhere in the construction. So if we were to substitute, well, if we use a machine, we'd have to substitute the leather components for thermoactive polymers or some sort of synthetic, because the machines don't get along with the leather so well. And that these, I'm just talking about the components in between the upper and the lining. So what we use, the bits that you don't see inside the boot are all leather as well. So what we use is what's called the heel counter, which is the thing that stiffens the heel and wraps around your back of your heel, keeps your heel in place, is a piece of wet molded leather. So inside is that.
Yep.
And we do that when it's wet in order for it to take that three-dimensional form. So we've got a bit of a hybrid of modern and traditional techniques, I suppose, in our production method. So we use traditional techniques where we have to, otherwise we're compromising on the outcome. And if we can use a machine to make things a bit quicker and therefore make things a bit more accessible for a customer, we do. So that's when we, basically everything up to the point of what I'm doing now is more or less traditional. The main difference, I guess, if you're talking about a hand welted shoe and what I'm doing now, is the insole preparation. So the insole that we use is leather, but it's just a flat piece of 4.5, 5 mil thick veg tan. Whereas if you're hand welting a shoe, you'd need to have a holdfast in the insole, and that's this channel here. So you can see how there's a rib that we created on the insole there, and that allows you to run a stitch into the welt. So you punch a hole through with an awl. The upper and the lining wrap over here, and so then the stitching is going through the upper and the lining, and then out into the welt. And the welt's the thing that you then attach the outsole to. So aside from that, it's basically a traditional. Everything up to this point is pretty traditional. We hand cut the shoe, we hand last the shoe. We sew everything on a single needle machine. So I suppose traditionally, if we're talking 1600s, you might have sewn it by hand without a machine. But traditional techniques up until this point. And then where we sort of deviate is where we start to attach the welt.
Yep.
And we use a method known as McKay welted or Blake rapid, depending on which person you're talking about who developed machines. So there's two men that developed the machine back in the 1800s. So we're talking just post-industrial revolution, 1840, 1850. And so what that is effectively we're creating our welt with a midsole. And then this row of stitching, rather than running through a holdfast horizontally into the welt, is running all the way through into the insole. So if you look at the cross section, you can see that row of stitching runs through onto the inside.
Yep.
And so that's running through insole, upper and lining, toe buff. You can see all the sections there.
Yep.
And then the midsole. So it's basically where that silver line's running.
Yep.
Between there and there, there's a stitch. And then we put another layer of leather over that, rubber or leather or whatever it might be, that forms the outsole.
Yep.
And then there's another row of stitching that runs around the outside.
That'll be pretty strong needle.
Sorry?
Pretty
strong needle, yeah, so it's machine sewn, yeah. This is a 1.2mm braided polyester thread. The needle is, it's about that in diameter, and it's actually a hook. So the machine's quite strange in so much as it's more or less an upside down sewing machine. So you've got your top thread coming from the bottom and a bobbin up the top, and a horn that the thread comes up through. And so you put the boot on top of this horn that goes inside the shoe, and then the hook comes down and picks up the thread and creates a loop. So the original Blake stitch machine was actually a chain stitch machine.